So if you feel like you are not supposed to be somewhere, if you ever felt that feeling where you are talking to somebody and you feel they're going to think you're a fraud, or they're going to realize that you don't know what you're talking about, then don't worry, because I feel like that all the time. And that is what we call imposter syndrome. And it is probably one of the biggest killers when it comes to content creation, content marketing, and building a successful brand online. It's an absolute killer. So in today's episode of Content Marketing 101, I want to talk to you about 3 things that you need to consider when it comes to overcoming your imposter syndrome. It's really not as hard as you think, and it is something that you definitely will most likely need to address if you are suffering with it. So let's look at it straight away. So what is imposter syndrome, first of all? So imposter syndrome refers to an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. Okay, so you're not as good as you believe, you're not as good as what people around you. They might think you're an expert, a thought leader, and you might not feel this is a true reflection. Now, while this definition is usually narrowly applied to intelligence and achievement, so things you do, it also has links to perfectionism and social context. So in other words, people suffer with imposter syndrome all the time. It's a daily thing, and we have this feeling that maybe we're not worthy of what we've achieved. Now, I'm going to talk about the 3 things then that you need to do to think about how you overcome that, because it's going to cripple your marketing success, content marketing, personal branding, all of that stuff. If you've got imposter syndrome, you're going to dampen it down. So let's look at it. The very first thing I want you to do is you need to break the silence. Okay, so it's like admitting you have a problem is the first step of recovery. It is a bit like that. You have to break the silence and understand that you are now suffering with imposter syndrome. And I have had to do this myself. There are certain scenarios in my life where I'm like, wait a minute, I don't feel like I deserve this. I don't feel like I'm good enough to warrant the notoriety potentially that I've been given. So you have to make sure you think, wait a minute, why am I thinking that way? So break the silence. Talk to someone about it. I talked to my wife about it. I'll talk to my friends about it. I have a group of community that I will, creators, business people, and I'll say, I feel a bit rubbish right now about this. I don't feel like I'm good enough. And they'll go, oh, well, that's ridiculous. So you need to break the silence when it comes to imposter syndrome. That's the very first step. The second step then to do is this is really important, separate your feelings from facts. Okay, separate your feelings from facts. So what you feel is subjective. What you feel is going to change. Everything around your feelings are usually they're your interpretation of the world. They're not facts. So what you need to make sure you do is, if you feel like you're not worthy, you feel like you're not good enough, you feel like people are looking at you and thinking that you're not as good as you are, look at the word in there is feel. Whereas actually the best thing to do is look at the facts. I do this with myself. When I feel like when I feel like I'm not achieving something, I feel like, oh my gosh, this is not working, I'll look and go, wait a minute, my podcast is top 3% in the world. Okay. My podcast charts in the top 100 marketing charts, lowest has been top 20. Okay. I'm a full-time content creator and pay all my bills and support my family by making content and coaching, consulting people in something I love with lots of people. Okay. Now, that sounds like a brag when I'm talking to you this, but actually I have to remind myself that on those days where I'm like, oh no, I can't talk about this. I don't know what I'm talking about. I can't. And this happens a lot, especially as a podcaster, when I interview amazing guests, is I'll be like, oh my gosh, these guys are coming on the show. Who am I to interview them? But when you look at the facts, and especially when I come on the show, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I love your stuff. You're really, really good. And it's like, oh, actually, they're looking at the facts. I'm looking at the feelings. So what I want you to do is make sure you separate those facts from feelings. Make sure that you're focusing on the facts. It's okay to live in your feelings and be part of that feeling, but make sure that you're not letting it govern your logical thinking. You've got to be really, really consistent in looking at going, actually, I am this. I'm not making this up. This is the statistics that have shown that. So that's really important. The third one to do is develop a healthy response to failure and making mistakes. So when it comes to anything successful, becoming good at anything, becoming mastery at anything, there's going to be failures along the way. I mean, gosh, there's going to be a lot of failures along the way. And you need to develop a healthy relationship with that. You need to develop a healthy relationship of getting comfortable being uncomfortable. That's what I was trying to say. It's a hard one to say. So you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the first thing you're going to have to develop. You're going to also have to develop this idea that when you fail, that doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means you failed at one thing. So developing this idea of you're not being judged by what you did, you're being judged by what you're doing now. So developing this healthy relationship of failure and making mistakes is going to help you feel less of a fraud when you release a podcast episode or a YouTube video or a TikTok that normally you're absolutely banging them out and they're great, and then all of a sudden you do one and it's bombs. You don't feel like your self-worth is not linked to that. So this is a thing that people do with imposter syndrome, is that if you're allowing these kind of non-tangible factors to influence your mindset, so things like I said, like feelings instead of facts, failure, what other people think of you, then this is going to cause you some problems. So just a quick overview on that, just for this episode, that is to overcome your imposter syndrome as a content creator. You've got to look at the following things. Make sure you break the silence and talk about it. The first step is to talk about the fact that you feel this way. Talk about it with your friends, your family, whoever will listen and you want to share that with. Next thing to do is separate your facts from feelings. Be sure to remember that feelings, as much as they are good when they're good, they're bad when they're bad, and actually facts are the most important thing. What actually on paper are you good at? If you've got a degree in something, if you're an expert in something, we know. So embrace that, embody that. And then the third one is to make sure you develop a healthy relationship with failure and making mistakes. If you are worried about failure, it's only going to amplify the way you feel with your imposter syndrome. However, if you get comfortable being uncomfortable and not worrying about the whole idea of whether you fail or whether you succeed, you're just looking at moving forward and gaining momentum, then realistically, it'll start to become less of an issue for you. So if you found this useful, then please be sure to drop a like if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast, then hit the subscribe button on the podcast as well to be kept up to date with all the latest content. My name is Ash Borland, content marketing coach, helping you build an impactful and profitable content marketing business. Check out the free masterclass, links in the description, and I'll see you in the next one, okay?